So, Josh, it is so good to see you again. It's been a little bit of time, but I've been following you and all the great work that you're doing up there. So I'm so excited to talk with you and see what you have going on. Now, the last time we talked, we agreed that license plate readers may be the one thing that unites us in this country. And that people from the right, the left, the independents, we may not agree on a whole lot, but this just might be the issue.
Yeah, it's good to see you too, and thank you for asking me to chat again. Um, Nothing has changed in that regard as far as I can tell. I still see folks vehemently opposed to what's going on with ALPRs from every political stripe out there. It has, as we discussed last time, it has unified folks in ways that few issues do. But apparently, it is becoming clear that nobody likes ongoing, persistent 24/7 surveillance. And that seems to be where we are right now as the fight is undertaken community by community nationwide.
In just the short time that we have been kind of following each other's work, and let's just call it a year, we've seen more of these cameras but we've also seen more people learning about them, seeing them, understanding. And right now we're in a situation where we have, a faction of people who I have nothing to hide. These are fantastic. They solve crime. Bring them on. And then you have the other side saying, get a warrant. I don't want to be surveilled. I would like to keep some of my privacy in public. Are you seeing that up in New York?
Um, there was a contingent of folks here who, and again, I don't begrudge anybody their opinion on whether these are a worthwhile endeavor. If you want to be surveilled, if you think that it helps solve crime, if you think that it's a deterrent, more power to you. I don't think it does those things. Um, I don't think it's a deterrent. I think it maybe minimally helps in solving an occasional crime. And there was an interesting statistic when we were engaged in the process of signing up with Flock in another town in the state of New York, upstate. Um, they had 871,000 captures in, I think it was a 1 month period. And of those 870 some odd thousand captures, they got 177 hot list hits. So if you do the math, 177 hot list hits out of 870,000 captures is a success rate, if you can call it that, of 0.02%. So small that it's meaningless, it's insignificant. Far from being a success story, it's actually a failure story. So might you get the occasional Amber Alert hit or the occasional stolen vehicle hit? Probably you will. But the cost of getting those hits and being able to solve those particular crimes comes at a cost of everybody passing in front of those cameras being captured. And I don't think that's a worthwhile trade-off.
When I do these interviews, I always want to make sure that the audience understands where I'm coming from in this, in that I fully support law enforcement. I am so grateful for the men and women in blue and what they do in our communities every day. So
Mhm.
I don't want people to feel that I'm anti-police or that I'm just trying to make their lives harder. It's not about that at all. It's about where we are as a society with the surveillance, how this technology is being introduced into our communities, really without any public input, without any notice. Sandy in Sedona out here, she had said in an interview, I was driving down the road and I see this thing in the sky.
And so then I started driving around 89A, which is the main street. And I looked up over the intersections and there's these cameras mounted just looking down at us all over, all the, at each intersection, there's like 4 cameras. And it was just chilling. The feeling is just horrible. You feel like you're in prison.
I mean, that's really how a lot of people are finding out about these license plate readers. The other thing I want to say is Flock is not the only manufacturer of this technology. There are several out there. So if I say Flock, I don't want to say it's just this one technology that there are many, many manufacturers of this. So one of the things when we first met, you did something that really piqued my curiosity, and is that you went and put in a FOIL request. You call it FOIL. Here in Arizona, we call it FOIA, but a
Mhm.
public records request for what did this technology have on you? What did the government know about your whereabouts? It was so fascinating to me that I did the same thing here in Arizona. And now talking to you a year later, no one, really no one in the state of Arizona can now go and do this because of the information that I found in my own files. And so I want to talk a little bit about that. I want to talk about your journey, where you are today, and really this interesting information that you found out recently about the size of these cameras and what we can expect in the coming years. So take me back to a year ago. How did this all start and what happened in your community?
So what happened here was there was a work session in January of 2025 that was under the radar because it was publicized as having to do with public safety technology or public safety equipment or something of the sort. It made no mention of license plate readers or drone technology or live cameras, nothing of the sort. So, of course, as municipal meetings typically go, it was not particularly popular. It was not widely viewed. Um, and then it came and went. That was in January of 25. And then on April 8th of 25, at the Board of Trustees meeting that evening, they put an item on the agenda that had not previously been on the agenda, voted on it that same evening. The item that they put on the agenda was to execute a contract with Flock. It was voted on that evening. It got a 6-1 vote. There was one trustee voted against. So at that point, the contract had been voted on. It had been approved. Later in the month, I think it was executed toward the end of April, and it took effect shortly thereafter. So on April 9th, a woman here in town, Joanne Wallenstein, who runs an online blog, um, wrote about what had happened the previous evening. And she said, oh, there was this vote on this contract with this technology company that's going to install license plate readers. And that was sort of when folks became aware of what had happened, and there was somewhat of an uprising against it. There had been no discussion, no debate, no public input, no call for public comment, no public hearing, nothing of the sort. And we are very, very fortunate that we live in a very low crime community. And I am 100% with you on standing behind law enforcement and who they are and what they do. I completely appreciate their work. But you can't introduce something like this on the down low and sneak it in surreptitiously and expect that folks in a community like ours are not going to be a little bit put off by what you've done. So shortly after that, I filed some Freedom of Information law requests to find out, to get the backstory on how this had all happened. And those requests over the course of time, there are legal requirements as to how long a municipality has to respond, but the village was responsive. I got what I wanted. Um, other residents also filed Freedom of Information law requests. And in one of those that went to another resident was this reference to a spreadsheet that contained the proposed locations of the cameras, which I thought was fascinating. And I wanted to see what they had intended to do. The contract was ultimately canceled in the first week of August. We had not gotten the grant funding that was supposed to pay for it. And I think that between the failure to get the grant funding and the fact that there had been fairly significant public outcry, the contract got canceled. But my Freedom of Information law request still stood. It was initially denied. On appeal, it was subsequently denied. And then after I got a favorable opinion from the New York State Committee on Open Government, which is a body that sits in the state capital of Albany, whose job it is to opine on the Freedom of Information law and the open meetings law, I sent that opinion to the village. I said, here's this opinion. The locations that you're denying me are matters of fact. That they're not uh, some sort of fiction, or a geographic location exists. It's there. It's a matter of fact. But they denied me again. So at that point, I had no choice but to contemplate legal action through the court system, and that's where I am now.
Why do you feel that you should have the right to see where these cameras are placed and what the plan is?
Um, because whether they were paid for with a grant or paid for with the village's money, either way, it's still tax dollars that are being used one way or the other. Because that grant is tax dollars ultimately, whether it's a state grant, a federal grant, or what have you. If it comes directly from the village budget, which it wasn't, it's still my tax dollars. And the Freedom of Information law in the state of New York has a very strong presumption and bias toward more access as opposed to less. And the exemptions are very, very narrow. And matters of fact are almost always disclosable versus information that might have been part of a deliberative process which I understand. You don't want a board of trustees that is going to be second guessed because their every thought and every comment is going to be made public. But the end product of those deliberations um, are facts. And it's applicable across almost anything that a board might decide. For example, they could this a municipal building or a school or something else. There are going to be deliberations that go into that, and I had no interest in the deliberative process. I only wanted to see the end result because the end result I knew was factual. I knew that those cameras would be installed one way or the other with tax dollars. So I think I was certainly within my rights to request that information. And I think that the village had an obligation under the law to provide me with what I sought.
So when you got the response back from the police chief there in Scarsdale, there was some interesting information that came out. Can you please tell us a little bit about what you discovered in that response?
So the chief of police, there were a few affirmations that were made. Those affirmations are part of the lawsuit, and they are in there because the village does not want to disclose the information that I had asked it for. Among the comments that was in the police chief's affirmation was essentially he made note of the fact that while these cameras are currently observable, the technology continues to evolve and will continue to evolve, and they will get smaller and smaller and smaller. And the implication, he didn't outright state it, but the implication being eventually we will get to a point in the miniaturization process where these cameras could potentially be undetectable. And that's a terrifying thought to me. Now, I know that there are currently physical limitations on how small these cameras can be. But just as we have shrunk the size of chips and gotten more information on them, shrunk the size of everything. Cell phones used to be a big brick, and now they're little iPhones and what have you. Um, the technology will improve. There's no question the technology, because that's what technology does. It advances, it makes things better, faster, smaller. Um, and if you're not, if we get to that point where these things are undetectable and law enforcement is under no obligation to disclose where they are, that's just a very frightening environment in which to live, I think.
You know, all I can think about is transparency. We have cities, governments, national, local, whatever, who all say, oh, transparency is really important to us. And now you see the potential that, they don't want the bad guys to know where these cameras are, but essentially nobody will know where these cameras are. Do you feel that there's just this dynamic there between the messaging of, oh, we're transparent and we want you to know all these things too. Let's hide these and make them smaller and nobody can know. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think most municipalities would tell you that they're open and transparent, right? They would tell you that, but you got to watch what they do and not what they say. because the proof is in the pudding. And I understand, I do understand the village's perspective. You don't want to divulge this information if you don't have to. And there are probably some states in the United States where the Freedom of Information law is more in favor of the ability to withhold versus the need to disclose. And there are places where the requests that I put in for the locations would probably lawfully be declined, and I would have no basis to even file a lawsuit. But in New York, the Freedom of Information law is very progressive, and there is a presumption of access, and the carve-outs or exemptions are very narrow. These are things that would have to be changed by the state legislature. So while I do understand the village's perspective, I don't believe that they have the law on their side. And in fact, that's already really been determined because there was precedent set on an issue very, very similar to mine 2 or 3 years ago in another community, Port Washington, which is
Okay.
on Long Island.
What happened in that?
Well, in Port Washington, there was a case. It was Charles Lane versus Port Washington, and he wanted the locations of the cameras that Port Washington had installed. They denied. He appealed. They denied. He went to court. Ultimately, he won, and the locations had to be disclosed to him. There are some minor differences between the Port Washington case and mine in that how the data was accessed, I think, by Port Washington. I don't think that they really had, um, I don't think they'd really promulgated a whole lot of rules and regulations and policies regarding, it was sort of, I think, a free-for-all with respect to data access. Um, and the other difference between that case and mine is that in Port Washington, the cameras had actually been installed. Here in Scarsdale, the contract was canceled and the cameras were never put up.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so, but I think it's hard to distinguish that case from mine, really.
Who do you have supporting you with your lawsuit, and where do things stand now?
So the New York Civil Liberties Union took up my case on my behalf. And just as an aside, I think that any state's civil liberties union is probably a good point of contact for folks who are fighting this in whatever state you might be in, be it Arizona, where, and just to go back to what we were talking about a few minutes ago, and I believe I read this from you that Arizona and possibly Connecticut are trying to carve out ALPR requests from disclosure under the FOIA laws.
Yes. So briefly, when I got my information back, I found several license plates, close-ups. We're not talking about passing cars, close-up, close-ups of plates that are not mine, that are tied to my data. I went to my police department and another police department and said, hey, can we get these deleted, corrected? What do we do here? And the answer was no. Not only was it no, my city went and made a new policy where no one else is going to be able to FOIA for their own information.
We've developed a policy on how to handle these public records requests and what is public records generally accessible to the public, and what does fall within those exceptions for privacy interests or best interest of the state. As you referenced, there is no state statute that directly addresses LPRs, and as often happens when you have these fast emerging new technology, it takes a while for government to catch up. There's no case law on it. You have to look at what is analogous records in statute, what is analogous records in previous case decisions, and try to figure out where that fits. And then working with the police department, we spent quite a bit of time over the last couple months, I would say, really diving into what makes the most sense in providing access and respecting the general Arizona law provision that, public records should be open to the public unless it fits into one of these exceptions that's well developed in case law. So we think that certain aspects of this probably does fall within those exceptions. And there are some privacy interests that probably needs to be respected. There are some operational issues that the police department needs to protect that from public records. So I guess that's a long answer to say, working with the police department, we've developed we think a defensible policy that we probably would not handle that exactly the same way we handled it back then. No.
They then took that policy and got it written into state legislation so that nobody in the state of Arizona or anyone driving through here would be able to FOIA and get their own license plate data, this digital dossier that the government is able to create.
So the biggest problem you have with it is this bill is the fact that the public cannot ask, what do you have on me? Because that seems like a pretty important thing, and that there's no way to correct it. So those two parts, is that your biggest concern?
It's AI that's getting this wrong. I trust my police department all day long. I know that they're training. I think they do a phenomenal job. The problem is this AI technology is not always accurate by the photos. And the fact that I don't know what's stored, I can't go and say, hey, there are 6 plates and 2 cars that are not mine. I can't get that corrected. It's very, very concerning to me every time I get in my car.
Thank you.
I went and testified about this, and it completely changed the course of the conversation. And there is a state senator here who ended up creating and writing, authoring, sponsoring another bill that would make sure that people could FOIA for their information.
The Fourth Amendment is not a suggestion. It is a command to government. You do not search people without probable cause and without a warrant.
So now we have these two competing bills. One that says we can use license plate readers as they're already being used. No data retention policy, no warrant, nobody can FOIA for their information. The competing one, Senator Hoffman's bill, says people can FOIA, you must get a warrant, and very, very strict guardrails, which would be the strictest in the country.
Perhaps the jurisdictions that deployed these were not transparent, didn't give folks advance notice. Okay, shame on them. Fact of the matter is, they're out there now. And this is, as you put it, this is basically setting up guardrails and standards for something that's already out of the barn.
I just talked with our Senate president today who said there's no consensus on either bill. So they're both just sitting there right now. And it's fascinating to me to see this happening here in Arizona. And this is because of you. I think you were really the inspiration for digging in deeper about our laws from New York to Arizona to see how this all works. What do you think about the fact that here in Arizona, we can't FOIA just for our own? I'm not looking for, Betty's information or anyone else. I just want to know what the government has stored on me, and now I can't do that. What do you think about that?
I think that's horrific. You're not under, as far as I know, Jen, you're not under investigation. You're not a criminal. You're not suspected of anything. You're a private citizen driving around wherever you're doing, whatever it is, wherever you're going, whatever you're doing, you're being captured probably every time you leave the house. Uh, I don't know what the concern is. Um, and when I did put my request in, and that request that I put in went to Westchester County, which is the next level up from the village. When I put the request in for my capture data, I was initially I was declined on my first request. I had to appeal that, and I prevailed on the appeal because I was only asking for my own information. I'm not under investigation, so it didn't. None of the exemptions applied, and I got that data. But the I can't see any valid reason why a municipality would deny a citizen their own data upon request. Um, because what purpose is served by denying you? I mean, it's virtually impossible to figure out, and believe me, I tried to figure out the locations of the cameras from the data that you get.
Mhm.
Very, very, very hard.
Mhm.
Almost impossible.
You have to really know latitude, longitude when you read the spreadsheet.
Yeah, it's and I got captured so many times. It would have even with artificial intelligence, it probably would have been too big, too heavy a lift to get that done. But what's the justification for not disclosing your own data to you? That's what I don't get. What's the reason? What's the rationale? Why can't you see where, not necessarily where, but why can't you see when?
I am all for cameras in an intersection. If there's an accident, go ahead, bring up the cameras, take a look, see what happened. But why are we storing every single driver's location data for months, even years? Why is that needed? If these people have done no wrong, why does a government need that information? What say you?
What say me? I agree with you 1,000%, of course. And if you saw it, and maybe you didn't, um, there have been a couple of stories in the last few weeks about individuals who are being pulled over repeatedly by mistake because there are apparently some states where the license plates, the O and the zero are confusing the license plate reader because they're too similar. They're not clearly distinguishable from each other.
And
And
I
the
understand it's the same with sevens and twos.
could
That's
be, yeah.
yeah.
I hadn't seen sevens and twos, but I had seen zeros and the letter O. And this one poor guy in particular gets pulled over every time he's on the road, and he can't get it fixed. So
That's the whole thing. My opinion on this is it should be like a credit report. You can go in your credit report, take a look at it, get the errors fixed.
who's out there motivated to fix the problem? Not Flock, not the local law enforcement agency that keeps on the guy who wants to get it fixed, who's got the zero or the O in his license plate. He wants to get it fixed, but he can't. You want to get it fixed, but you can't. So it's got to be fixed either by law enforcement or by Flock, and they clearly don't care.
Yeah. Okay, so for the people who are hearing all of this for the first time, and maybe even some people who are very knowledgeable about this, what is your message to them? And what do you think about this response from the police department up there about the size of the cameras? And what are the next steps for you?
Well, so I can't quibble with what the police chief said about the size of the cameras. He's 100% right. They're going to continue to get smaller. They will at some point down the road become undetectable. Um, I think maybe that wasn't the best thing to put in to the affirmation, um, because it is so frightening in my opinion. So, and it didn't, I don't think it added anything. Um, it just sends a chill down everybody's spine. Um, where I stand right now, my matter is it's in the hands of the judge. Um, all the papers have been filed at this point. There either will or won't be oral arguments that will be determined by the judge if he wants to have them or not. If so, then there will be, and if not, he will consider all the papers and render a decision. So that's kind of where I am. What I would say to anybody who is even remotely interested in this is you've got to get involved. You've got to know what's going on with your municipal governance, whatever board, council, whatever you trustees, what have you, whatever you call it. Know what's going on. Um, Familiarize yourself to the extent that you can with your state's freedom of information law, however it reads. See what you can get legally, obviously, from a freedom of information law request. Uh, get documents, read the documents, get a sense of the back and forth. If this is already in your community and you don't like it, which is what happened recently in Dunwoody, Georgia, um, try to shut it down, which many, many, many communities are doing. Not enough, in my opinion, but there has been sufficient uproar. This battle has been undertaken. Many communities are shutting this down, and good for them for doing it. Doesn't happen all the time. Didn't happen in Dunwoody, unfortunately, but it certainly won't happen if people just uh, are complacent about it and don't get in the game.
Where do you see us in 5 years from now when we have our follow-up conversation about all this? What are we going to be talking about at that point?
Well, I hope it won't be 5 years, Jen, but what I hope, well, so the Institute for Justice, which has been involved and took up a case in Norfolk, Virginia, for a couple of plaintiffs who were literally boxed in by ALPRs. Um, the Institute for Justice works nationwide, and I'm in touch with them periodically, and I know that they are working with some legislators here in New York, in Albany,
And here in Arizona.
to try to craft some legislation to put some guardrails on this whole thing. I haven't seen what they're proposing. I can only keep my fingers crossed and hope that it is robust, and that it does um, limit data retention or limit the use and abuse and misuse of these cameras, and do the types of things that folks like you and I would like to see it do. And I hope that that can be done either on a state by state basis, or perhaps at some point this becomes such a hot topic that it gets taken up on a nationwide. Maybe something ultimately gets to the House or the Senate, so that we have some rules and regulations in place nationwide.
Thomas Massey, with the help of Naomi Brockwell, she's phenomenal. They're working on the warrant, the Fourth Amendment, making sure that there's a warrant when doing these searches.
I think the fight is on. Flock had a tremendous head start because of the way they got into communities without tipping their hand. So it just is going to play out, and we'll see where we are in 6 months, a year, what have you, and hopefully we will all find ourselves in a better place.
What drives you? Why is this important to you?
I'm not entirely sure. uh, I do value my privacy. I do have and always have had a healthy skepticism for authority. Um, I don't necessarily trust government at any level. And I want to be aware of the things that are being done in my name, right? And this is being done in our name. Although Flock is a private company, it is a for-profit company whose revenue derives, I don't want to say exclusively, but almost exclusively from public coffers. So we should be entitled to know what the government is doing in our name.
I fully agree. I fully agree.
Regardless of what it is, from a municipal pool to a new library, to tennis courts, to whatever it might be. What they do with our money, how they spend it, and what they're spending it on is our right to know. And surveilling people is as unpalatable as that is. Look, you go into Home Depot or Lowe's or any mall that you might happen to shop at, there are private cameras, right? And I don't, can I take exception to that? Not really, right? I mean, I'm on private property with a private company that, for whatever reason, mostly to ensure that things aren't walking out the door, right? They're doing what they do. This is the persistence of ALPRs, I think, is particularly bothersome to me. The fact that they are not only capturing the criminals, the wrongdoers, they're capturing everybody 24/7, no matter where you're going, what you're doing. I mean, think about the possibility for abuse at um, a political rally or a house of worship, whatever it might be, right? They see your license plate. There you are. You were at a political rally for whomever. You attended such and such a house of worship. you enjoy going to House of Pancakes. I don't know, but it's just not right.
It- uh, I feel like, have you watched Naomi Brockwell, where she describes a shifting baseline where decisions are being made on what happened yesterday? So compared to yesterday is a little less freedom now. But if you look 5 years, 10 years, 20, 30 years, we're talking a huge shift in what's happened. And I saw that happen here recently in a city nearby. They had a discussion. It was, at work, this and that and the other, they surveil me. I mean, what's one more camera? What's one more, I'm okay with this and that. Well, would they have said that 10, 15 years ago? That would have been like, what do you think you're doing, keeping track of everywhere I'm going? And I just feel like every little inch that
Mhm.
they're taking from us and that we're allowing to have happen, even within a year or so, I think that I feel like this is a losing battle. I really do. And really kind of the goal is to wake people up and just inform them of, and everyone can make their own decision, make up their mind about how they feel about this. But just to have that conversation is so very, very important. And I appreciate everything that you've done. Thank you for staying in touch with me so that I can learn more from you. I won't be filing more requests. No. Just kidding. Just kidding. But no, I really do. I just appreciate all that you're doing up there.
It's always a pleasure to chat with you, Jen. And if I just want to say one thing, because you sort of touched on the gradual erosion, because this is it's an issue that comes up all the time about that, where people say, and I get this, and you've probably gotten it too. People say, well, you carry a cell phone and you use an easy pass, right? And there are a number of such things, conveniences that we use, right? And my response in those cases is that there are conveniences that I use, but I use them voluntarily, right? I have an iPhone. I can turn off location services. You could argue whether or not that really has the effect that you want it to have, but I have an easy pass. I don't have to have an easy pass. The big, and this really gets to sort of, I guess maybe the crux of what bothers me about this, which you asked me earlier. There's a very big distinction to be made between the privacy that you sacrifice voluntarily and that which gets taken from you involuntarily. And to me, that's what this is all about. And maybe I should have said that earlier, but that's the whole thing in a nutshell. Don't do I have global entry? Yes, I have global entry. I've got the Easy Pass. I've got a cell phone, all that stuff. My choice, my choice, right? You're surveilling me 24/7 against my will, not my choice. And that's the game changer for me.
I couldn't have said it any better. I absolutely agree with you on that. I had talked to a state lawmaker here and he had said, well, you have your phone. Do you even know what this phone does? Well, I can leave my phone at home. I can turn it off. I can live and go about in society without my phone. I can't drive I need my car just to get to the hospital, to get to the grocery store. I live in a community right now where I cannot drive in any direction from my home without being picked up by one of these cameras.
Mm-hmm.
I don't choose that for myself.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And there
That's
was
the thing.
no
Yep.
public, there was no public input at a public meeting where we were invited to come and have that conversation. And that's where we are as a society.
That's the whole thing right there. That's the whole thing. It's what you choose for yourself, the trade-off that you're willing to make versus the theft of your privacy that you were not willing to make.
Well, Josh, it's been so great talking with you.
Likewise.
Please stay in touch. No, we won't wait 5 years, hopefully here, when you get your decision back. I would love to talk with you
Okay.
again.
We will do that.
All right. And keep up
Okay.
the good fight up there in New York.
You do the
Arizona,
same.
we're counting on you.
Likewise, counting on you.
All right.
Okay.
Well, thank you for everything.
Thank you. Thank
All
you, Jen.
righty.
All right.
Have a good one.
Bye-bye. Bye.
Bye.